Yo, hey guys, this is No Huddle Fantasy Sports, and it is Saturday. Actually, it's late Saturday night, but you're up, I'm up, we're still grinding, getting ready for NFL Week 11. Of course, I'm here sharing with you my top core plays for this weekend's main slate of action, both DraftKings and FanDuel. We're talking about the top players, the core players, those guys that you want to build your lineups around this upcoming Sunday. So before you finalize any lineups, before you hit a submit button and enter a contest for tomorrow, make sure you stay tuned and pay attention to this video, the best free content you would have to pay for elsewhere. I've got you covered right now to help you build the best lineups for tomorrow to make sure you win and come ahead in daily fantasy football. Welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports and the Week 11 NFL DFS Core Plays video here on YouTube. These videos are pretty simple. You've tuned in for the right reasons. That's because you want a straightforward approach to DFS. All the BS and bloated material has been cut out. It's simply which players are in the best spots, which players you should be building your lineups around this weekend. And if you're just starting your weekly research and are kind of uncertain where you should be heading in terms of games and which games should be targeted, go ahead, the link is above. Check out the video I posted earlier this week covering the top 5 matchups. That's defense versus position information. And of course, if you're new here or simply want to help the channel, if you've benefited from these videos, the easiest way you can go ahead and support this channel, support me, support No Huddle Fantasy Sports, is to make sure you give these videos a thumbs up, like them, share them. And finally, the biggest thing you could do is make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That's the easiest way, like I said, that you can continue to help support this channel. But of course, always thank you guys for taking the moment to find this channel, clicking on this video, and hanging with me as we cover the best DFS content for NFL Week 11. But before we get too far down the road, we always like to jump back to the previous week. So in this case, Week 10, do a little bit of a recap. I talk about how much exposure I got to which players and how that turned out. But overall for Week 10, you might look at this and say the running back position was pretty weak overall. But for me personally, this was my best week. Week 10 was my best week all season long. By far, I put together some of the best lineups I've done all season. So you can see here the two number one running backs are the two highest owned players, David Montgomery and Devin Singletary. Both of them were nearly 50% owned, just did not do very well. Christian Kirk had a ton of exposure to him, 45%, and he just went absolutely bonkers. Stacked him with Kyler Murray, and this is what really helped me carry my lineups. Kyler Murray, 41%. Those two combined were just ridiculous. Had a lot of exposure to Matt Ryan, who did throw, I think, a couple touchdowns, but he was a little bit of a letdown. Christian McCaffrey, what more can you say? He just gets... it was like his worst week, and he got 30. Michael Thomas, incredible week for Michael Thomas, had 28% exposure to him, so that was a great play on our end. O.J. Howard, basically play tight ends versus Arizona. O.J. Howard has sucked all season long. He was very cheap. Put him against Arizona, 27% owned on my end. Did very well. Marlon Mack, another running back that I had him as a core play, 24%, did not do very well. Chris Godwin, he did average, but for his price, we need a lot more. I also mentioned Russell Gage. Again, a guy that was almost bare minimum, 17% owned on my end. He did okay. Mark Andrews, I didn't somehow get a lot of exposure to Mark Andrews, and I think it's because of Gesicki and O.J. Howard. But Mark Andrews, nonetheless, did very, very well and ended up paying off. And finally here, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but there's been a lot of questions about transparency in showing some lineups as I enter them week in and week out. So in an attempt to do that, I've listed from Week 10, I talked about how this was my best week, my most profitable week, put up some of my best lineups of the year in Week 10. These are those lineups. You can see here I put up nearly 232 points for these 5 lineups for Kyler Murray, Christian Kirk stacks. These are guys that are core plays straight out of the videos I gave, my DFS videos from last week. But also on the flip side, you can see I had a lot of David Montgomery. And the reason why, I got 63rd with 232 points out of a very, very large contest. The thing holding me back from literally first place was David Montgomery. But nonetheless, 63rd, 232 points. I think I put up 25 to 30x on my entry fee just on that one lineup alone. But the overall point being that these are guys that I've given out in the core play videos. Again, I had a great week 10. I hope you guys did too. Please let me know down in the comments below how you guys did. The goal here, of course, is to roll that success right into Week 11, which we're trying to do here. For my core plays at the quarterback position for this upcoming weekend, this Sunday, I'm going with Jameis Winston of Tampa Bay and Kyle Allen. That's so hard to say for some reason, for Carolina. Jameis Winston, 6,500 on DraftKings, 7,600 on FanDuel. He is a home underdog versus New Orleans this weekend, a high total game at 49.5, and he is getting 4.5 points, which is a pretty close spread. I love home underdog quarterbacks. It's a big play for me. But of course, this is fantasy football. Jameis Winston, in my mind, is not a very good actual football player, quarterback, but he is a great fantasy football player. I'm talking about 4 straight 300-plus yard games in a row. That's great on DraftKings, where you get that extra bonus when he breaks that 300 yards. And the volume. He has thrown the ball in those 4 straight games more than 40-plus times. That's 40-plus attempts in 4 straight games. So, again, great opportunity for him each and every week to get those bonus points and to get yards and touchdowns. And if we drill down a little bit here to the actual matchup versus the New Orleans defense, they're kind of an average middle-of-the-pack team, middle-of-the-pack secondary. They're not the greatest team to target for quarterbacks, but they're also not the hardest team either. But the big thing here is they are without Marshawn Lattimore this weekend, their best secondary member. So their secondary is taking a big hit. I think that opens up more opportunity for Winston and his receivers. Of course, he does have elite receivers on the outside. So overall, we're talking about a reasonable price, a high-scoring game, a game at home, which they'll probably trail and have to continue to pass the ball. He has elite receivers, and of course, that secondary takes a hit with no Lattimore. I like Jameis Winston. And as we drop a few pegs on the price ladder here, I'm going with Kyle Allen. Kyle Allen. Why is that so hard to say? For Carolina. He's another guy that's playing at home, but the difference is he is a slight home favorite. Still a 49.5, a high over-under. 4.5 point spread in his favor. He's coming off the best game of his career, which obviously this is a short career, but last week he threw for 307 yards and 1 touchdown. Beyond that, he's actually seen a lot of volume in the passing game, and to me this has shown that Carolina's offensive coordinator and coaches in general, they're showing some trust in him. They're allowing him to move the ball through the air a lot, but he's had 3 straight games of 32-plus attempts. The matchup with Atlanta is an excellent matchup. They're giving up 258-plus yards per game to quarterbacks, and that's basically averaged out to about 23 points per game fantasy-wise. And overall here, the big thing is it's a value play. Kyle Allen, I said it right, 5,300 on DraftKings, really, really good value there. 7,200 on FanDuel, I'd probably think that one. But especially on DraftKings, I think you're getting a good value here, and it allows you to fit more pricier players, whether it's running backs and receivers, into your lineups by going with him. Moving on to the running back position here, the number one guy I'm listing should be Christian McCaffrey, so it's not, though. Just play him. If you're wondering why I don't have him listed, it's just because it's too easy. If you can fit him, if you want to go with safety, go with Christian McCaffrey. But I'm going with Ezekiel Elliott this week for Dallas. He is 9,000 on DraftKings, 8,400 on FanDuel. He's a bit pricey and certainly not having the greatest season overall, especially in the passing game. He hasn't had much of an opportunity with targets and getting it going through the air. But we know his history. We know he can do that. And we can't ignore the matchup here. That's the key versus Detroit. Detroit currently is just awful. I think they're number 1 overall, giving up the most points to running backs in PPR. That's 31-plus points, fantasy points per game on DraftKings, full PPR, and 28-plus on FanDuel. So just a great matchup versus Detroit, who's given up over 108 rushing yards per game. Again, this is a matchup play. You know who Ezekiel Elliott is. He doesn't look slow or anything. He doesn't look like David Johnson. It's just he's getting the opportunity. He's had 22-plus touches over his last 3 games, 22 per game at a minimum. So all good things pointing to he's going to explode at some point. Again, he's pricey, but I really like Ezekiel Elliott in this great matchup versus Detroit this weekend. The next core running back I will be building lineups around this weekend is Tevin Coleman for San Francisco. Somehow his price is listed wrong here. I think I just copied Elliott somehow or moved something incorrectly around. In either case, he's 6,100 on DraftKings, and I think that number is 6,700 on FanDuel. But the big thing here, it's an opportunity play for Coleman. He is in a great spot with Matt Breida going down with injury, who is currently currently doubtful for this upcoming game. I always love running backs that are huge home favorites, and that's exactly what we have here, as San Francisco is favored by 10.5 points at home this weekend versus Arizona. We've seen big things from Coleman in the past, this year and even beyond that in Atlanta. The issue has always been, especially this year, is because he has to split carries. He has to be super efficient. But I think that changes this weekend. I think his volume's going to go up. His touches all around should go up, whether that's through the passing game or on the ground. You should probably get 20-plus touches out of him this weekend versus a pretty mediocre to below average Arizona team. I like Tevin Coleman this weekend with an advancement in opportunity with some injuries to both Breda and Kittle. Next up is a guy that's going to garnish some ownership. A lot of people are talking about him. Great price here on Josh Jacobs for Oakland, $6,900 on DraftKings, $8,000 on FanDuel. Another guy that's playing at home and a heavy favorite. Of course, Josh Jacobs is having an excellent year as a rookie. He's a good mid-price back here, gets plenty of opportunity, especially on the ground, with 19-plus touches in 7 of the 9 games this season, and of late really is getting that almost week in and week out. But you got to love that against a very weak, a very awful, really, Cincinnati defense that simply cannot stop the run. They're giving up 116 rushing yards a game. That's amounting to 4.7 yards per carry, which is the second worst in the NFL currently. So that's Josh Jacobs here. I love him this weekend. I think a lot of people are going to be on him, so just be wary of that. And finally here, I'm going right back to the well with Devin Singletary. He did disappoint us last week, didn't do very well, but he's in another great matchup this week versus the Miami Dolphins' awful defense. Yes, he's on the road, but over the last couple of weeks especially, we've seen him do a lot of damage through the air, through the receiving game, so I'm not really worried about that. That kind of negates the fact that they are a road team, but they are a favorite. He's still seeing a bulk percentage of the snaps versus Al Gore versus Frank Gore. He's seeing 67% of the snaps right now. That's Devin Singletary. So getting a bulk majority of those snaps. I think he gets back to kind of his self here with the majority of the work versus a Miami team allowing 131 rushing yards per game on the ground and giving up anywhere from 26 to 29 fantasy points per game to backs. I do like Devin Singletary again this week and probably has lower ownership due to his bad performance last week. Moving on to the wide receiver position here. I talked about Winston. Now we need somebody to stack him with. The guy I'm going with is Chris Godwin for Tampa Bay. $7,300 on DraftKings, $8,000 on FanDuel. I talked about how much I liked Winston and why. The biggest reason, of course, Lattimore is missing from that pretty average secondary of New Orleans. And even with him, New Orleans has been very, very weak versus inside receivers. So it's been a great matchup. We saw them play each other in Week 5 in New Orleans, in which Godwin had 7 receptions for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns, but it's going to be backups of backups playing against these guys, and I love Chris Godwin, stacking him with Jameis Winston this weekend. And of course, we got to stack somebody with our other guy, Kyle Allen, and I'm going with DJ Moore here for Carolina. You can play Christian McCaffrey, by the way, with these guys. I don't think it really hurts. Typically, running back, wide receiver, quarterback combinations don't work out too well, but McCaffrey's a different type of species. Just go ahead and do that if you can and if you want to. But DJ Moore here for Carolina has been excellent. His price continues to stay pretty low, $5,900 on DraftKings, $6,000 on FanDuel. He's just not scoring touchdowns. But besides that, he's been excellent. He's had 30 targets over his last 3 games. It's an elite wide receiver cornerback projected matchup according to Pro Football Focus. So again, we have a great spot for DJ Moore for that whole Carolina passing attack, and he's the guy I'm going with from that wide receiver core. And I really do hope I'm alone on this one. A lot of people are talking about Julian Edelman for New England attacking that Philadelphia awful secondary, but not a lot of people are talking about Mohamed Sanu for New England. I love him this weekend. He's probably going to be one of my most owned players. Very, very low, reasonable price on both sites. $5,100 on DraftKings, $5,800 on FanDuel. 2 weeks ago, because they had a bye last week, he got 14 targets from Tom Brady, turning that into 10 receptions in Week 9. Tom Brady, for some reason, has a good history with getting his new guys, his new toys involved. Sanu's certainly that guy. And the good news is he played a ton of snaps. I think he played 100% of snaps in Week 9, which was not the case the week prior. They had a bye week, so he should be all caught up in that offense. He should be ready to go. And the big thing here is that Philadelphia secondary simply cannot stop outside receivers. They're just tearing up that Philadelphia secondary. I'm not on Julian Julian Edelman as much as other people. I'm on the outside receiver. That's Mohamed Sanu, a guy that's getting looks clearly from Tom Brady and just is too cheaply priced. I love him this weekend versus Philadelphia. And finally here, another guy that just remains cheap but continues to get heavy volume. We love volume. We love opportunity in fantasy football. 5,200 on DraftKings, 5,900 on FanDuel is Tyler Boyd for Cincinnati. I mentioned the volume. He has 31 targets over his last 3 weeks. He continues to get fed the ball regardless of who's playing quarterback. And even beyond that, it's a good matchup versus Oakland on the road. Cincinnati trails every game, so they should continue to pass the ball. Except for last week, they gave Joe Mixon like 30 handoffs, which is crazy in a game they trailed. But we're not going to try to figure that out. We're going to go with logic here. Tyler Boyd, Cincinnati, a game they'll trail versus Oakland, a top 10 matchup. I do like Tyler Boyd as a value play this weekend. Moving on to the tight end position, who are we playing? Well, it's bad news, guys. There is literally no one available. Like, everybody is dead. I'm talking Kittle, not playing. Hooper, not playing. Who are we going to go with? Well, I'm just going to relist what I had last week here. Mark Andrew for Baltimore. He's your safest bet at tight end this weekend. He's priced up there a little bit, but he's the favorite target of Lamar Jackson, averaging 7+ targets a game. In week 10, he had 6 receptions for 53 yards, got a couple red zone looks, turned it into 2 touchdowns. He's facing what I would call an elite matchup according to Pro Football Focus on paper versus Houston. He's the number 1 tight end according to them in terms of the percentage and the advantage he has as a tight end versus whoever he's playing. Again, he's really safe. You know what you're kind of getting with him, and he's getting those red zone looks. But if you really want to jump down and you want to go with what we always go with, you take Ross Dwelley for San Francisco versus the best team to target for tight ends, and that's Arizona. Dwelley is only $3,400 on DraftKings. That is dirt cheap. We're talking cheaper than O.J. Howard last week, and we played him. But $4,900 on FanDuel, a little bit less of a value, but still nonetheless a value on both sites. He has an opportunity here. George Kittle is out with injury. In Week 10, he played 80 snaps, which accounted to 91% of the snaps. And keep in mind, Kittle did play and tried to play through a lot of that. So expect that number probably stays the same, if not goes up to 100%. He should play, and he got 7 targets last week. Jimmy Garoppolo has a history with targeting tight ends. You got to like that. But again, he's $3,400. Arizona is the best tight end matchup. Ross Dwelley, you just need a couple catches. If he gets a score, anything more than that, it's just cake, man. $3,400 on DraftKings, go with him. And of course, like I mentioned, these aren't the only guys. Those are guys you want to build your lineups around. Who are some of these other guys we want to consider? Of course, I have Christian McCaffrey highlighted here. In case you guys forgot, he's really good at football, so just play him. Brian Hill, he's going to be heavily owned, probably the most heavily owned running back. Really cheap for Atlanta, got 20 carries last week, 21 total touches. You could take him for Atlanta if you're looking for that value play. Miles Sanders here for Philadelphia. I have him start. Keep this in mind. Howard is currently, I think he has a stinger going on. If he is out, I love Miles Sanders. He'll be a core play of mine if Howard is out, so pay attention to that. Michael Thomas, Green Bay should not, he doesn't play for Green Bay. He plays for New Orleans, obviously. He is the Christian McCaffrey of wide receivers. He is priced way up. That's why I don't have him as a core play. It's hard for me to pay that much for a wide receiver, but nonetheless, you know what you're getting for him, and he's facing a very, probably the number 1 defense you can face as a wide receiver, and that's Tampa Bay. Julio Jones, I have him listed here and highlighted. I think he's a little sneaky. At any moment, he can go off for 250 yards and a couple touchdowns. Sneaky play here for an elite receiver that's going to go low owned. Deebo Samuel, again, start here. Pay attention. If Emmanuel Sanders is out, I like Deebo Samuel. And Greg Olsen for another tight end, albeit I think he's going to be the highest owned tight end this weekend, but he's in nonetheless a good spot. And all right, that wraps up the Week 11 NFL DFS Core Plays video here on YouTube for No Huddle Fantasy Sports. I realize this video is late, but I had a lot going on this week. I did the research. I couldn't put out a video unless I legit did the research, and I know what I want to give you guys. So trust me, these are the best plays. These are going to get you cash this weekend. And if you haven't done so already, I'll link it above again. Check out the previous weekly video. I talk about defense versus position, which players, teams are in the best spots according to defense versus position statistics. I also link out spreadsheets, cheat sheets that you guys can use. So make sure you check that out. And of course, if these videos are useful, if you find them beneficial, if you enjoy them, give it a thumbs up. And of course, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Those two things are the easiest, simplest things that you can do to make sure this channel continues to grow. It helps support me. It helps support No Huddle Fantasy Sports. So that's all I ask of you guys. Please make sure you're subscribed and give this video a like. And finally here, leave some comments down below if there's a player I missed, if you think any of these plays are bad plays, or of course, if there's anybody else that you think is a better play. Let me know down in the comments below and let me know how you're doing, how you did in week 10. And finally here, I realize this one's a bit lengthy, but I don't want to take any more time. Thank you guys, as always, for finding this channel, taking the time to click on this video. You guys certainly are the best, and good luck tomorrow, and I hopefully will see you atop the leaderboards.